Hello, hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hi,
Hello.
everyone. How are we doing?
Yeah,
Awesome.
go
So,
here.
here is another episode of Argo Unpacked. This is episode number 5. I want to call out episode number 4. I did not attend this one. It was Andrew and Dan. You guys did an amazing job talking about secrets management. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And I want to mention that we have the YouTube channel of Argo Unpacked. It contains a lot of short videos that I'm creating out of the episodes, as well as the episodes themselves. So if you missed that, feel free to go ahead and watch it. And of course, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, get some info about Argo Unpacked, and only about that, you can subscribe here. So today we are going to talk about GitOps Cloud. We have a special guest, Idan. How are you, Idan?
Excellent. Excited to be here. How are you guys?
Awesome.
So this is kind of dovetailing off of a pretty hot topic from ArgoCon, which was GitOps promotions. So everybody has, just to introduce the topic, everybody that's using Argo CD or even any deployment tool knows that there is it's one thing to deploy a piece of software to Kubernetes or to any server, but it's another thing to figure out how to orchestrate the promotion of one change from one environment to another. And there are lots of scenarios for this. You have the dev test, the staging, and then production flow, which is very common. Almost every organization does that. You have regional flows where maybe you're pushing to US West, then US East, and those changes need to be made. And this might be orchestrated in addition to doing feature flagging, maybe canary releases. Those things might be part of it. But just the act of actually deploying and then orchestrating the changes between that's something that kind of everybody in the world is doing. But I find that everybody is doing it like by kind of reinventing the wheel from scratch. Like everybody is doing it using CI/CD tools, or they're doing manual steps, or they've built some custom tooling. And one of the things that we talked about at ArgoCon was the different ways that people are approaching this problem. Today, we're going to focus on GitOps Cloud from CodeFresh and how that solves the problem of doing promotions between environments and applications. And Idan is not just the product manager in charge of this, but really kind of the big architect of this whole solution. And so this is something that we've been talking about, for at this point almost a couple of years. And so maybe Idan, you should start with what was the big. Well, actually, let's start with give us just a brief overview of what's happening in GitOps Cloud, how it works, and then maybe we can talk about why it works that way and get into some of the details.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan Levitan, for having me here. I'm excited to talk about GitOps Cloud. We just launched it in KubeCon, so that's amazing. I hope I talked to a few of our guests here there. We've been working on CodeFresh for GitOps for quite a while now, and it had multiple iterations. And we really mainly focused on, Argo CD, deployment of infrastructure. That's amazing. That works. That's just great. And everyone's happy with it. We've tried to think, what can we do to improve that? Didn't find too many opportunities there. But what we really found out and what we talked about is because everyone likes to deploy and enjoys and makes it easy to deploy infrastructure with Argo CD, there's like, hey, why don't we deploy all our software for Argo CD? And that's when the issues arise and the problems come, and you understand that Argo CD wasn't built for that. And as a product manager, we see pain, we see issues, we see opportunity. So that's kind of what we wanted to do with CodeFresh. We wanted to solve that pain and make the process, I would say, and people might not like it, but as seamless for the developer that it used to be with Jenkins a while back. Just build, test, test, deploy. There's a pipeline. It's simple. The developer knows what to do. As simple as that, using GitOps and Argo CD best practices, but also give all the flexibility, observability, and tooling that comes with the GitOps methodology. And I think that's what we mainly focus on.
Yeah, and GitOps Cloud. So for those that have followed CodeFresh and even since before we joined Octopus Deploy, what we were showing in GitOps Cloud should look somewhat familiar, because a lot of the primitives, like a promotion flow, products, environments, which we'll get into, those things existed and have been part of the CodeFresh platform, but it's really been only available to enterprise users. And so people like I don't know if I can name too many of these customers. I won't name customers that I'm not sure that we're not allowed to name, but like large financial services companies, banks, gaming companies. I know we have a lot of case studies on some retailers. So it's a pretty popular tool among the enterprise, because they definitely have the need of managing not only multiple Argo instances, but just multiple versions of an application, where they have a dev version and a test version, a staging version, they have a production version, and then maybe they have regional versions. And so with GitOps Cloud, what was new this week, Idan, was really making that much more accessible to people and broadening the audience to everybody in the market, right?
Yeah, 100%. So we really kind of we built something that was available for enterprise companies, but we want to make it accessible to smaller teams, and we want to do it in two ways. First of all, streamline the experience. So now you can connect to an existing Argo CD instance in 2 minutes, assuming the resources you have just to run the Helm chart, to install the agent. And we streamlined the flow in the UI, the wizard, to do all of that. So everything's much more simpler. We introduced a bunch of documentation and help videos and blog posts, again, to give you the full story on how to set it up properly. Because what we've really seen, and I think we can see that by popularity of Kostas's blog posts, is that people are looking for answers. There's no best practice. There's no way to do this. They're searching for podcasts like this to learn how to do that. So we really wanted to build in those best practices into the product, what we've learned from working with these enterprise customers, and really provide this to entry-level customers and people, small teams that are starting to employ with Argo CD, that don't want to build everything from scratch. And while it's not sexy to talk about this, but we reduced the price quite a bit. So it's now very accessible. We might show the price a bit later. It's actually available on the website. So I think that all of these things together are where we say, hey, we want this in the hands of as many users as we can. So
yeah, if you're a small team and you want to use this tool, it opens at $4K a year. So it's pretty accessible for most teams. So whereas in the past you had to be that enterprise tier customer to get access. Now there's still some enterprise tier stuff, but in terms of accessibility, definitely a lower price is easy. Install with an existing Argo instance where you can just install an agent. That makes it a lot easier. And then I know we also introduced some features around promotion hooks, so you can have more control over that flow. Let's actually. So we are going to do a demo later here, but we did get the feedback from a lot of our people that listen that they're like, hey, I really want to just be able to put this on in the car. And if you're doing a lot of demos and slides and stuff, then I lose that. So we're going to keep it mostly audio for a bit and talk a little bit about the philosophy here, because I've seen from all these different tools that we've been talking about, and like most people are just using maybe a CI/CD pipeline that they've rigged up to talk to Argo. So they've got, like, let's say GitHub Actions, let's say Jenkins, they could be using CodeFresh CI, they could be using any, GitLab CI, whatever. And they basically give that pipeline access to a Kubernetes cluster so that it can check on Argo app statuses. They give it access to their Git so it can go and make Git commits. And then they'll kind of go from there if they want to do GitOps. And if they're not doing GitOps, maybe they just manipulate stuff in the pipeline and push the change. So maybe we should talk for a minute about why this is better, right? Like why, like people have been doing it that way for a long time. Why isn't that good? and I have my own thoughts, but I want to let you go first.
So what we've seen is that people are doing faux GitOps in a sense with Argo CD. What does that mean? You set up an application to sync from your Git repository to your cluster, but then you turn off autosync. Why? Because you need to manage the sync state with your pipeline. And then you're losing all the benefits there. And you have to manage your pipeline. And then you do the commit or trigger the sync. But what happens afterwards? How do you validate that the application is healthy and works? And how do you run tests in this environment and so on? And usually, also, you're jerry-rigging everything. You're writing scripts, and it's not the GitOps way. I think one of the first things that we introduced was the concept of an environment. That's something that doesn't exist in Argo CD. And what is an environment? It's a cluster, it's a namespace, it's a collection of clusters and namespace. It's all of these apps that have this a label on them. Yeah. So we want to make it very, very flexible. And it's really transforming the terminology that you speak of. I mean, something that we've talked about a lot is I'm a developer. I want to deploy version 1.2 from dev to production of my billing microservice. When speaking about Argo CD and what you have today, everything is kind of, hey, let's build out a naming convention that all of these apps are actually called billing dash name of the environment.
Yeah, billing dash prod, billing dash US, whatever.
And sometimes I need to figure out how to add a version number and all this. So these are things that these vocabulary and these terms are things that we introduced into the product. We have a concept of environment. We have a concept of, hey, what is this thing that I'm deploying to 3 different environments, but it's actually the same thing in different versions? Let's call that a product, because that can be anything. It can be a microservice, an umbrella chart, a Helm chart, whatever. How do I tell these things apart? Let's put up a very clear indication of the version. And this version can be, again, completely customizable and flexible. It can be the Helm chart version, or the app version, or the image tag that you latest deployed, or I stuck this attribute in my Kubernetes, in my customized overlay, and I just want to call this the version, so we can do that. So
that's this brings up two things that you brought up here. First of all, everyone defines production differently, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think you actually you were the one that originally came up with this idea of like, let's have environments, we're going to have it defined in these different ways. And I remember going and talking to people afterwards and talking to users, Argo users or CodeFresh customers or both, and asking them like, how do you define production? And every single one of them gave me a different answer. They're like, oh, well, I have these 3 clusters over here, or like I have this namespace, or I have like these app labels, da, 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 da. And so what that creates is this complexity in thinking for everybody when they're like, oh, is it in prod? Is it in prod? Could mean anything. It could mean a whole bunch of different things. So the fact that within this promotion tool, there is just a primitive for like, this is what the environment is defined as. And so if you want to push to production, you can define it however you want, right? It's any cluster, any namespace, app labels, whatever. You've defined production. So now when you say, hey, is that in production? We all know exactly what you're talking about. And the definition is not only sitting in my tool, but it's actually also sitting in Git and has a definition for what that is. And yeah, go ahead.
I want to go one step backward. So we're talking about environments, we're talking about products, and we're talking about basic concepts. Maybe it will be a good idea if Idan can give a few words about each one, because every time I hear about environments, I always mix it with products. So Idan, can you give like a basic explanation of what is environment, how does it define, what does it contain, products, etc.?
Yeah, so it's very simple. And if everyone can turn off their eyes, close their eyes, unless you're driving, and imagine the matrix of applications you usually have in Argo CD, the grid, and let's split it up vertically and horizontally. So usually what you do is, hey, all of these vertical applications I'm going to split my environment. So I have dev, test, production, and again, as we talked and as Dan said, it can be anything you want. It can be a cluster, a namespace, a collection of clusters, a namespace. Anyway, it's simply a cohort of applications, of Argo CD applications. This is what we call an environment, by the way. An environment can be production. It can also be US East, West, Asia. It can actually also be early adopters. I have a bunch of single tenancy applications that are early adopters. this can be my environment, this can be my group, and I can decide to promote only to these set of applications. So it's extremely flexible. So that's
so it's not necessarily production, staging, or deployment. It can also be like regions and.
Yeah, 100%. It can be anything that makes sense to you in the way that you want to deploy your software. And then the second thing is that how I usually imagine is split the apps horizontally is, okay, now when I have this application that's deployed in dev and it's deployed in staging and in production, in different clusters, it doesn't matter. But in Argo CD, these are 3 different Argo CD apps. Maybe I had an application set to define them. Maybe I didn't. How do we tell the platform, the system, how do we know that these 3 are actually the same thing? That they look the same, but they're different versions. This was released today, this was released yesterday, and production was released 3 days ago. So that's what we call product. We wanted to give you the method to group these applications into a logical entity, and then apply to that certain best practices, configuration. How do I want to deploy this product? How do I want to monitor this product, change it? Who has permissions to see this product? All of these things come into play. So those are essentially the 2 basic primitives when you talk about promotion.
So theoretically, products can be deployed in multiple environments.
Most of the time they are, yeah. That's what you would do.
Okay.
Yeah, a single product has multiple environments. Yeah,
Yeah.
a single product
Okay.
is the relationship between, it's basically like a grouping of applications, Argo CD applications, which can exist in any environment.
And again, we chose the name product, which is kind of strange because actually everyone does this differently. So again, we were talking to our users and they're like, hey, what are you deploying? So some of them, microservice, or they said an application. And I said, no, it's an umbrella chart with 10 different microservices in it. How are we going to call this? And at the end of the day, this is your product. This is what you're deploying. This is what you're making available. Because honestly, Argo CD hijacked the name application and we couldn't use that. So we had to think of a different term for that.
So Argo CD doesn't have the concept of an environment. It has clusters, it has projects, but those are not environments and they serve different purposes. And it doesn't have the concept of a relationship between multiple applications. An application set might generate multiple applications and they belong to an application set, but it doesn't actually tell you if those are comparable. For example, very common to make an application set that generates multiple types of different applications. Like you might have an application set that generates everything you need for security and it deploys
for bootstrapping your cluster.
Yeah. So that doesn't work as a proxy for what a product is. And the really cool thing is that the product lets you take advantage of the Argo CD primitives, because what a product does is it allows me to say application 1 and application 2 are part of the same life cycle. And so when I compare them, I can defer to the source in Git that app 1 and app 2 have. So when I do a comparison automatically, I now can just rely on what those applications are pointing at. But because I've created that relationship, I now have the ability to do that diffing and comparison. And then I know which manifests need to be updated, which is why this works with application sets in addition to an app of apps, in addition to just plain applications, right?
Exactly. And I think, so some of you are probably thinking, yeah, but I got this covered with annotations and I have different naming convention for my apps and I got scripts to make this work. And honestly, I like to compare this to people that are managing e-commerce websites and things with Excel or Google Sheets. You can do anything with Google Sheets, but then there's actually tools built tailor-made for a use case. You've got Monday.com, you've got Jira, Trello. These are tools that are built for a specific use case. And that's what we've done. You can script out everything, and that's probably what you're doing today. But if you really want to understand, hey, what am I promoting? What is this thing? How do this environment is a production environment. I should have one set of permissions around it. This environment is a non-production environment. Do whatever you want with this. Building those concepts into a platform is what we've done to make it easy for you to manage this and not have to worry about this. I think anytime you can just spend $4K a year on a tool that has gone thousands of man hours over, I don't know, tens of thousands of man hours, spent thinking about building and investing in is probably you'll get a higher quality solution.
Well, yeah, and like so many people, when you talk to organizations about how they do this stuff, so many people have like the one guy. It could be a gal, but they'll have one person, right? That they're like, oh, Steve does that, and you're like, oh, how does Steve do it? And they're like, I don't know, it's crazy magic. He wrote a bunch of scripts. It's really complex. He doesn't like us to mess with it. It's hard to work with. It's fragile. If it breaks, he gets really mad. And if he's on vacation, it's a problem. That's very common because the orchestration component, it's like at the end of the day, your goal is to write software, get it deployed, make your users happy. And to get it deployed, Steve has done a bunch of random stuff. And this process, first of all, I find it very easy to get because I look at like, oh, I have a CRD for promotion, a promotion flow, and I can define really quickly stuff moves from dev to staging to production Europe. And I can define that super quick, just a CRD. It's a clear definition. It's declarative. So it's already GitOps friendly. I'm not writing an imperative CI/CD script and then claim, and saying, hey, that's GitOps-ish because I committed it to Git. It's not really GitOps if it's imperative, right? GitOps has to be declarative. So like that's really easy. And I can make a single promotion flow that covers everything in like 10 seconds. And then grouping stuff into products so I can actually start kicking off promotions in a manual way is really easy because it's just an annotation. And then if I want to set up automated rules, that's part of kind of the promotion flow and saying like when a change is made here and then goes to there and how it's tested and add testing, all that kind of stuff. If I were to do that just using a CI/CD pipeline, a flow like that takes me, a week of work in a CI/CD pipeline, I can probably get done in like 5 minutes.
Cool.
Just by clicking on commit, right?
Yeah.
When I do a promotion. So maybe so we have environments, we have products. Maybe we can deep dive into those features.
And I think and when I demo the product, and I love demoing my product, it say these environments and dashboards and products. These are nice, but we want to talk about promotion. So how do you do a promotion in GitOps? And I think we don't do a kubectl apply, kubectl apply. We do a commit. We open a PR. That's the core of how you want to promote in GitOps. And any action that CodeFresh does and the platform does results in a commit. And that's very important to us. We don't do any magic on the cluster. We update the desired state. And so the core principle that we introduced is how do I promote? So I have my product, let's call it billing. And I have an instance in dev and an instance in staging. Two Argo
billing dev and billing.
Yeah, billing dev, dev staging, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't care about that any name anymore. How do I promote from dev to staging? What happens? So in our UI, you can actually do a drag and drop, which I love showing. But what happens is when you promote from
you will show soon. Don't worry.
Yeah. But when we do a promotion, we actually go and find the source, desired state, Git repositories for each of these applications and do a comparison between them. And then we do a diff and show you what changed and show you this is what we're going to commit. These are the changes that we need to apply to staging to make it the same as dev. And then you decide, hey, am I going to commit this or am I going to open a PR because someone else needs to approve this? This is governed, of course, by RBAC and policies and et cetera, that you can make sure that no one does something that you don't want to do. And that's the core of the promotion process. Now, we also made it, I think, very intelligently on how flexible it is because we were thinking, okay, let's take a Helm chart, and I can probably guess what artifacts need to be updated when I'm doing promotion. I can find all the image tags and stuff. I know how Helm works. But what if I'm doing customize? What am I updating there? That's free-for-all, essentially. And the way that we built it is in a very flexible way that essentially tells you as the user, define our product CRD and add a configuration there. And tell us, hey, look at the desired state of my overlay, or look at the desired state of my values file, and go to this specific JSON path and only care about those values and attributes and only compare those. And I'll show this a bit later in a more visual way, but essentially what it gives you is the flexibility to define what attributes get promoted from one environment to another, because I don't want to promote my database connection string from dev to staging. That'll break everything. I don't want to promote it to production. And actually, what's more important, that I think is more important, is not what you get to promote, is what you get to not promote. Yeah. What stays the same. And that was a key for us in building this. And we were thinking, how can we make this flexible? How can we make this work for everyone? Again, there are no golden standards that everyone follows and would make my life as a product manager very easy. Hey, I just need to take care of this scenario and it works. No, everyone's doing things differently. Everyone has good reasoning why their setup is like this. Very unique, but it's important for their organization. And we don't want to go against the flow. We can help you with best practices, but we want to make sure that the way you need to model promotion, the way you have a script that does this today, is easily transferable and works with CodeFresh out of the box.
Now, this is a feature that I think is really inspired by Argo CD itself, right? Because Argo CD has the concept of ignore differences with applications, where you might have the most common use case is you have like a pod autoscaler that's sitting on the cluster and it's changing the number of replicas needed on a deployment. And Argo CD by default will see that as drift and want to correct it. And you can just specify and ignore differences in your configuration and say, hey, ignore differences to this field, essentially delegating control of that field to the pod autoscaler. So this approach with promotions of saying, okay, you have ignored differences with applications, that works really well. What if you could have that with a product at a product level where you know that there are certain things that are meant to stay in staging, and it's really easy to like using the JSON paths the way that that GitOps Cloud does. That's my favorite. It's honestly one of my favorite things to use, because it's so easy to say, like, or to structure my Helm chart, my Helm values in such a way that it's like, these are staging values, these are production values. Then I can just say, take this file, take that, and don't take that file. But it's also easy with customize. It doesn't matter what tool I'm using. I can very quickly say, only take these things or don't take those things. And that makes it really easy. And then when you're getting the diff, you're only getting the relevant diff about what's changing. You're not getting all of the irrelevant components that are part of that diff.
And again, you get this front and center when you're doing a promotion. You know what you're being promoted. You're sure about this. You get a preview. And again, I was demoing this in KubeCon a lot, and we talked to users, and I could see that they were thinking and telling me, hey, I can script this. I know how to script this. That's what we have to do. So yes, you can. But another thing that's very exciting about what we have offered, and we're actually enhancing very soon now, is that what happens if you're doing multiple promotions on this product? How do you manage the concurrency across this? How do you manage what release is, how many releases can happen at the same time? What happens when they try to update the same environment? Should we terminate? Should we wait? And when you start thinking about those issues, that's not easy to script anymore. That's a much more complex functionality. And we thought about that. We encountered this. We're dog fooding the promotion Argo City, and we've been using it internally. So we've come up to these use cases and said, okay, you know what? For this product, actually only one release should happen at a time, and all the others will just queue, and they're gonna wait. Or you can set it up so that they queue for each environment. So I can go from dev to staging to pre-prod very, very quickly, but I want to queue them before production. Someone needs to go and approve them and watch over that. So we have two terminations.
But what if that is not the case? What if I want to determine that I have one release that should terminate the other? I don't want to queue them all.
Again, we have that. So we have right now two methods, and we're working on the third one. And again, it's very easy. You don't have to care about that anymore. That's built into the product. Yeah. We help you do that. We help you visualize, organize that. And again, the whole sense of what we've been talking about is, how do I let you focus on what you care about? And that's not writing scripts.
This is something that Victor Farsik talked about when we gave the talk on comparing different environment promotion tools, is that if you're using a CI/CD pipeline to do this kind of stuff, it basically has to always be running, because it needs to be waiting for different statuses. It needs to be committing and then waiting for like things to get picked up. And suddenly, like anytime you're running a CI pipeline and it's been and it's like 24 hours, it's like you architected something wrong, right? Like that's not the job of a pipeline, and it's not a good tool for it. And again, it's all imperative operations. So it's very fragile. With this, totally declarative. I can just define what I want my outcomes to be. The tool's going to take care of it. If it needs to retry or whatever, it's going to do it without me having to go write the logic. And if I want to have the logic built in of, okay, skip the next, do a catch-up release. If stuff is piling up, then you don't need to go sequentially. Just cancel everything else, go to the latest one. That doesn't work for every team because it depends on how your application is architected and the different microservices that you have and all these kinds of things. So that makes a lot of sense to have it be flexible and have it be in a format where I can just, pick how I want to use it.
Exactly. And again, that's sorry about that. But that's where we kind of think, hey, where's the pain? Where do we need to help our users? What can we make simpler for them? Because we are investing a lot in this and thinking about this. And again, providing the options. Everyone's a snowflake. We see everyone doing some things differently, especially if you compound it across, hey, I'm setting up my applications one way, my environment another way, my attributes, my helm files, my concurrency. The options are endless, and we wanted to support those and wanted to make them easier to maintain. That's a big plus, because that's why everything is a CRD in CodeFlush in the GitOps Cloud. Everything is a CRD. It's all very, very easy to read and manage and kind of audit.
And it leads me to my next question. What happens if runtime crashes? How do we handle the disaster recovery?
So again, because everything is based on a desired state, and you have a catastrophic incident with your cluster and you need to bring up another cluster, all your desired state definitions, all your applications, all your promotion flows, your promotion templates, your products are defined in Git. Spin up your Argo CD, point it at this one magical repo or 10 magical repos that you have that hold all this, and go get coffee. And you're done. There's nothing more to do, essentially.
You can bring everything back from Git, just like you can in Argo CD, but here you can actually bring everything else back from Git. So not just the application state, but the product definition, the environment definitions, all of those things are sitting in Git. So you're not beholden to, the tool necessarily to store that stuff or a live state to be tracked.
Yeah, and there's one thing so if you were in KubeCon and if you wasn't, go see Kostis's presentation about application sets. It's amazing, best practices. And one thing he mentioned there, and I loved, is like, we wanted to build some of these best practices are hard-coded into the product. And one of them is that there's no create an application that creates an application manifest on the cluster. Everything is defined in Git in CodeFlush. So when you go and create an application, you actually commit the manifest to Git, and no cute bunnies have to die if you watched the presentation, because you're doing things just in the cluster, which is a huge no-no in Argo CD.
So no, that's an Argo CD. Well, in Argo CD, there is a create app button, and every new user is like, sweet, I can create an app so easy. And it just goes onto the Kubernetes cluster. And so every person that loves Argo CD will immediately never use that button again, or even disallow their users from using it because it creates a problem because stuff isn't getting into Git. But in CodeFresh, you bring it back. And you have that button back, but it goes to Git instead. So it's more mature.
Exactly. The end result of clicking is not save, it's commit.
Yeah.
And by the way, Dan, did you know that Kostis' presentation in KubeCon was based on episode number 2, Argo Unpacked?
So yeah, go back and watch episode number 2 on Argo Unpacked.
Luke and Kostis talked about application sets, good practices and stuff.
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, that's a good one. I learned a lot.
So something else you done that reminded me of is earlier you mentioned something, and I think people may have missed it. Is you were talking about how the promotion state is in Git, it's not in the cluster. So for example, with application sets, there's a feature called progressive sync, which allows you to basically define once a change, and it will go and push it to a set of clusters, and then to another set of clusters. Now, these are all all these applications has to be part of the same application set. And a lot of people look at that and they say, okay, that's great, because that actually gives me some promotion ability. But it misses a lot of things because it's not really designed for promoting changes in the way that we're talking about it. It's really designed for reducing risk when you're rolling out a large infrastructure change. But
and dependency mostly, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And one of the things you have to sacrifice to use it is auto sync, because the way that it works is it turns off auto sync, updates all the applications with the new definition of what should be deployed, and then it goes through and manually syncs them. And that mimics a behavior that is very common to new Argo CD organizations, where they will rely very heavily on manual sync. It's totally normal while they're learning to trust the tool. But eventually, as you become more mature, you realize auto sync is the preferred method, and Git is my main interface. And if I have a promotion tool like CodeFresh, it's actually easier for me to trust the automation and not have to give that up. Because once you go into manual sync mode, it's really scary, because your actual state is no longer in Git. And so if you have to do disaster recovery, like Ravital is talking about, you can't just go and say, well, just bootstrap whatever's in Git. That's going to get me back to where I was, because you actually don't know where you were.
Yeah.
Because you had manual sync going on.
I think so. It's like driving in first gear. It's good for it's training wheels. I think it's not the way to go. You're not going to get what you need from Argo CD with having auto sync turned off. That's one of the I think we started with when designing promotion CodeFresh and GitOps Cloud is auto sync turned on. Start from there, make everything work and make sense after that. And as part of that, and again, when talking about progressive sync and everything, deployment and promotion doesn't stop with sync. I mean, that's just the first thing. How do you know that it's actually healthy? How do you know that you can move into the next environment? And again, these are things that you should probably script out and contact with the Argo CD API or whatever. And our promotion really takes that into account. So two things that are very important that we've built into: how do we say that an environment is green, is healthy? So to break it down, essentially, to the steps that we do, is we start by looking and seeing that there's a new desired state, there's a new state in Git, the application, and we need to sync that into the cluster. So we actually, before that, we allow you to run an Argo workflow to do any preparation actions that you want on the target environment. So essentially, you can say, hey, I actually need to run a database migration script before I update this environment, this application. Run this workflow, or one of our customers copies all of their images to a production image registry repository, and they do that before. So you can run workflows that can essentially do anything. They're running adjacent to your application on the cluster. So that's the first step that we allow as an optional step. We then sync the application, refresh it, sync it, wait for the application to become healthy. Only once it becomes healthy, we know, okay, all the health checks passed. Run another workflow to do validations, to run your smoke test, to run your end-to-end test, to make sure that everything works great. By the way, if you're using Argo workflows, Argo rollouts, it's baked into that and works as expected. And only then, if we ran the workflow in the beginning and it worked, we did the commit and it worked, the application is synced and healthy with the latest revision and it's green. We ran the post-action workflow and it's green. Only then we say, hey, this environment is green, works, and you can move on to the next environment. So we wanted to give you the tools to choose to when do you promote, when is it healthy, when is it safe to move to the next environment. And by the way, you can choose to, when you're moving to the next environment, starts with a commit, or should start with a PR, and then someone needs to go approve it before going and actually running all the additional tests and updating the application.
And they can do that as a policy rather than an imperative operation. They can just say, hey, for production, that always gets PRs, and you don't have to go and then build the logic around it. It's like, man, it's crazy how much easier it is. I know that where I'm like, actually, I'm thinking like, man, I don't want to make this sound like I'm just trying to sell this thing so hard, but like, it's just like, and obviously I've worked on it with you, you know, and CodeFresh this is the tool that we built, but like, I am just so excited about it, and I love using it. And every time I get to use it, I'm super happy. And if I'm using it manually by doing a drag and drop, it's super cool. If I'm letting it be automated and you do a promotion, it's super cool. And there's just nothing out there that gets anywhere near to this level. And the biggest challenge I see from the community is that they just don't realize that maybe this solution is out there. And so they're still thinking, no, I got to reinvent the wheel using CI/CD because I have it. It reminds me a little bit of the problem where a lot of people who first start using Argo go and build deployment tools using Argo workflows. And they do it because they hear that Argo is the best way to deploy software. They go to the Argo website and they see Argo workflows and they're like, that kind of looks like CI/CD. That's kind of like what I used to do. So I'll use that tool. And I can tell you, I've actually talked to some multi-billion-dollar companies who spent, 18 months building a giant Argo workflows, promotion and deployment tool to then realize like, oh, Argo CD is actually designed for the deployment part of this. And then and there's a tool like GitOps Cloud from CodeFresh that actually does the promotion part of it. A lot of people don't know about that. And so they're stuck reinventing the wheel. As the famous quote goes, the future is already here, but it is not evenly distributed.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's not perfect. There are things that we haven't done yet and we're planning to do. One of the big items is Git-based rollback because, hey, Argo CD does rollback again, have to turn off autosync to make it work. And it's not the way. And you want essentially to do a commit when doing a rollback or a commit forward, how you want to call that. So that's something that we're working on. And there's still things to improve in the product. But again, we wanted to give you yes.
I have a question about monitoring. How do we do monitoring?
So depends on what you say monitoring. Again, GitOps Cloud is not a monitoring tool. We're not here to replace your monitoring tool set. But what we really wanted to do is give your developers clarity, because I've been talking to a lot of platform engineers, and you're building this amazing life cycle that does this test and moves between environments and everything, and then you hand it over to your developers. Here, use this, and they don't know what to do. And when something doesn't work or doesn't pass or a test fails, they don't know how to open it, and they need to find out the correct Argo CD UI they need to go into and find the correct application based on the naming convention and go to the very beautiful resource.
Or even use external tool,
and try to figure out the correct pod to look out and why. And what is it? A sinker? Is it a application health error? Is it a rollout issue? Is it a commit failure? On all of these things, and developers hate it. And then when developers hate it, they complain to their platform engineers and they complain to their bosses, and everyone's not happy. So I think we wanted to build a product that would, on one hand, build you the capabilities to model whatever you need. On the other hand, give your developers some peace of mind, give your developers ease of use, of understanding. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, but it's presented very easily on the screen for you to understand and troubleshoot and fix. So that I think, and it's honestly, it might be more important than all the promotion mumbo jumbo and things that we've been talking about, because your developers are deploying the code that they built. That's what your company is there for, to deliver.
That's actually one of the things that I love, is abstracting the underlying environments, the promotion policies, the tests that need to run, all these things in such a way that as a developer, like, I just want to say, like, push to prod. And so it's like, okay, is this in prod? And I can just see that progression happening. Like, oh, it's about to go into prod. And if there's an error, I can fix it right away. I know what it is right away. But I don't have to care that the infrastructure team added new clusters to production yesterday. I don't have to care about that. I don't have to care that they're scaling stuff underneath the curtains. And I feel like we're getting a lot closer to that theoretical interface for, like, when Kubernetes launched, everybody was like, oh, this isn't going to be the interface for developers. We're going to build stuff around it. I actually feel like this gets us is probably the closest I've seen anybody come to making something that really makes it seamless to adopt Kubernetes and get all the value out of it without having to go and figure out how to boil the ocean yourself to do it. So
I think it's
go ahead.
I want to say that it's perfect timing maybe to move to the demo.
That's what I was going to say. You took it right.
Start to see. Okay. Great minds.
Yeah. And feel free to throw questions into the chat. I see a lot of people are watching on X. I see some people watching YouTube. Thanks everybody for joining live. And if you're watching this or listening to it later, thank you for doing that. Don't forget to subscribe at codefresh.io/Argo-Unpacked. It's on the screen right now for updates. You can also follow us now on Twitter, X, and I think we have a Blue Sky account now. Maybe
we do. Right. And
LinkedIn. So you can follow us in all these places. And not only do we post clips from the show, but we'd love to hear your ideas, show ideas. If you have requests, questions, hit us up on social and let us know what you'd love to hear about. And we'll keep talking about Argo and GitOps and deploying software. And we have lots of great guests and lots of fun. And so I think we've got some more coming up in the next 2 weeks. So we'll get back to those. But in the meantime, Idan, would you mind sharing a demo with us?
Yeah.
We've been talking about the philosophy of this whole time. I'm sure some people are just like,
let's see the pretty
dying to see something. Yeah.
So yeah, sure. So let me share my screen here. So starting with the environments dashboard. Now, you only left me about 10 minutes to do the demo, so I'm going to rush this and show you the key part. So this is what we talked about. I've got environments, I've got dev, QA, staging, I've got different products. Here's my membership product. And let's start. So this is version 1.28.3, and this is version 1.26.17. This is, and let's actually skip this one. I'll come to this, but let's see this one, because this is a trio app, and this means that it's built from 3 different microservices. One very cool thing that we haven't talked about is that if I click here, I can see the underlying dependencies, and I can compare these dependencies across different environments. So this is kind of not related to promotion, but we want to make your life easier. We want to give you information that you need at your fingertips. So just this. But what I really want to show is, let's do a promotion. I'm going to do a drag and drop promotion. Don't worry, you can choose whatever environment you want to deploy to. And what's happening now? So this is what we talked about. We're comparing the 2 repos. We're looking for differences, and look what we found. We found that the app version changed and that the tag changed. Now, am I going to do a pull request or a commit? Oh, I can't actually choose the commit. Why? Because someone built a policy that says, I'm deploying now to a production environment. You're not going to get to do a commit here. Mm-hmm. You have to open a PR. So let's do a live demo. Let me create a PR. And that's going to happen behind the scenes. I'm going to wait. And we've actually seen that we've started a release. This is our releases screen. Every time CodeFresh GitOps Cloud does a promotion, we see a release that happened here. I can go and see here the history of all the releases and what environments they were deployed to. Right now, we're deploying between Prod EU and Prod Asia, and that's waiting. Let me see. So let's go to this one. This is a nice one. I've got here a bunch of, let's actually go to full screen, 4 different environments, 6 different environments going on here. Some of them in parallel, some of them sequential. There's dependencies built in. This is where yes.
I have a question. Where can I see a promotion flow? And I want to see if they're sharing this.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second, how we built this out. But what I wanted to show here is, again, I want to talk about the developers. This is where we want developers to live. This is where the information is. This is where the reason why something didn't work. And these environments are green not because we like to call it green, but because they passed successfully. They passed the pre-action test, the post-action test in each environment. And you're actually going to get, so this is not sharing because it's a different window, but we also have commit statuses to send to your GitHub, to your commit. And you can go there directly from GitHub into this screen if anything fails. If anything, everything works properly, like we have here, a promotion that succeeded, We don't care about that. So let's go and see the promotion flow. So this promotion is got here 6 different environments, we said. Let's go see how easy it is to build this from scratch. So I'm going to go here and go to my promotion flows and create a new one. Okay, I'll shut this out. I don't care about this one. I'll start with my trigger environment. Let's start with dev. Dan, what should we do after dev?
Let's go to both staging and QA at the same time. Make it hard for you.
That's done. So these are going to be deployed to in parallel. After that,
Don't we want to run some tests? I don't get it.
Yeah,
test, but let's do the environments first.
Yeah, let's set up the
and
so
yeah, from staging, let's go to prod simultaneously in EU, Asia, and US.
Ooh, nice. And so what happens after QA? Let's also have this depend on QA. Why not? Perfect. Now, wow, this is really complex. Let's see how easy it is to build this. I'm going to click on this YAML button here, and wow, 33 lines of very, very short YAML got this to happen. This is our CRD. This is a promotion flow. We get the, you commit this into Git. Let's click on save. This is not a save. This is a commit. So this is what gets committed. And it's very easy to understand. What do I have here? I've got here environment staging, depends on dev. And the policy is to do a commit. But if we go a bit down here, we can see that environment production Asia, which is a production environment, depends on staging. So the policy is to do actually a PR. And we can obviously customize that here. We can change to a manual automatic deployment or a manual commit. And so let's add the test. Let's make sure that before we move to production, we tested QA thoroughly. So I'm going to add here a post-action workflow, and I'm going to run my smoke test. Now, these are Argo workflows that execute next to our applications in QA. By the way, QA can actually have 10 different Argo CD applications running on different clusters managed by different Argo CDs. We don't care about that. That's a completely separate layer. You can do whatever you want there. We're going to run this workflow on each and every of those applications to make sure.
Such an important point. Such an important point because, again, we talked about any environment, people define it differently. If I push to production, that may mean updating 75 Argo applications, each in a different cluster with a different Argo CD instance. And we haven't really talked about this as a control plane, but this is a control plane. So behind the scenes, any number of Argo CD instances or clusters could be running. It doesn't matter to me as a user or as an admin because I kind of abstract that away with a simple CRD like this.
Exactly. Now, I can add these tests. I can add additional ones. But what we usually see, and let's add a soak test here, is let's add integration with ServiceNow. So we have these nice little hooks here. And that essentially means that I can decide to start ServiceNow. Oh, Hebrew. ServiceNow. I'll open a change request here. And I'll send a Slack notification if this promotion is complete successfully. And on production US, I'll configure a hook, another Slack notification. And on success, I'm going to close my service now. So move into implement. Let's do that. And again, it's that easy. And everything that I did in this fancy, very pretty UI is stored in the CRD that you see here and easy to understand. And you never have to go to the RUI if you don't want to. Everything can be managed directly in Git. With bypassing the UI completely, Argo CD is going to sync these resources to the platform, and everything's going to work magically. And by the way, this promotion flow, let's go ahead and save this.
Dan, one question I have. Maybe you walk through it because it was a little bit quickly because we instructed you to do it quickly. So it's not your fault. But one question, smoking test. What if it fails? What if one test fails? Can I do I have a flow that can go out of it?
So again, you can, when a smoke test fails or any validation test fails here, the environment will be considered, the promotion will fail. And you will trigger, so in this example, if this environment fails, on failure, I can do something else. I can send a Slack notification. I can create a workflow that will skip a step. I can do a bunch of things. And because it's using Argo workflows behind the scenes, it can be as flexible as you want and run any container that you want. and pretty much I've talked to a bunch of people in KubeCon, and I gave them this challenge: give me a flow that I can't model here very easily. And fortunately, I haven't gotten this example yet. And it's completely flexible. And if it's not flexible enough for you, let us know. We're still working on this. This is not a done deal. I want to hear this feedback. I want to see what else we can improve here. And it's that easy. So I'm just we showed you the drag and drop promotion, the promotion flows, the CRD, how we manage everything. I'm not going to go too deep. The last thing I'm going to do is let's go to my Trio app. And we got this quick search here, which makes my life so much easier. And let's take a look at the releases. So again, it's very important to see this release screen, the history of all the releases, who did what. And again, let's go to the one that failed. When things go wrong, I have a clear indication what happened here. I can see the logs. I can access exactly what application failed to deploy, what workflows failed to deploy. I have this information, or more importantly, my developers have this information. So that's amazing. And we also tack onto this, and we haven't talked about this, but release notes that actually give you information from the CI. And these show you pull requests and Jira tickets that are associated with the code change that trigger the building of this image, then the deployment that goes all the way to prehistoric to the beginning of times, so that when things go wrong, you know exactly what happened, and you can understand, and you can talk, you know who to talk to. I need to talk to Francisco. I need to talk to Dan Garfield here. I know who to work with.
Super powerful. And I like the challenge that you set up for the viewers. If you find any scenario that cannot be addressed here, we want to hear about it.
Oh, so one thing we talked about, we have to show you this. So again, we've got this product, and we've got the product settings and the concurrency that we talked about. But let me show you the promotion settings, because I really like this, and Dan, I think you also like this as well. So here we decide what gets promoted. So version.yaml, we're going to get this JSON path. And look how easy it is to essentially choose the path. So I don't need to figure out the wildcards and the exact path. I've got a preview here of my YAML structure. I've got example of the values. I can say, hey, let's take the repository with 2 wildcards, add that, and that's when I'm going to get promoted. And I need to commit these changes. And if I want to see that this is actually what I want to promote, I can preview the configuration, and it's going to load up here an example app and show me the values that will get promoted. So again, I have confidence in what I'm doing. It's easy to set up. And again, all these values are also reusable across different products. So I can put them in line like I have here, but I can actually reference a template that can be used across all my products. So essentially, I can actually model my entire CD lifecycle for all my applications, all my services, with 1 or 2 promotion flows, promotion template, a few products. I can connect multiple flows to one product. So we'll go through all the stages on a standard release, but with a hotfix, we're gonna go from dev to production right away. So again, that's super flexible.
This is another thing that I really like, is that you can actually build multiple promotion flows for not only different scenarios, but they can kind of overlap in a way. So you can say like, oh, like I'm going to push to early adopters, and early adopters might be a subset of a larger production environment. That's okay. Like I can do that. And so I can build these really powerful, flexible flows. And I love the idea of a hotfix too, where you're going to have probably some different criteria for just like approvals and stuff, but you can skip a lot of the steps because you just need to get it out and right away. Whereas normally in the past, when you have a hotfix like this, the solution is call that one person who has access to all the things, get them up in the middle of the night, make them all break process. And so you end up having a situation where basically people are left with unreasonable levels of access that shouldn't really be needed, and they're having to break glass way too often. Whereas here, it's like, no, we have predictable flows for how to handle these scenarios. It's a much better situation to be in.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Amazing. So we have subscribe to the CodeFresh GitOps Cloud YouTube channel, and we've got in-depth videos about everything. Lots of, like, I think 10, 11 short 5-minute videos detailing all this functionality and much more.
You
So
did a
it's
great
easy
job
to-
with that, by the way.
Thank
Those are
you.
great. They're really short. They're easy. They're accessible. And Idan, this is only for enterprises, right? I can't access this. I have to go talk to a salesperson to use it, right?
Yeah, so go sign up. There's a 45-day free trial here.
Yeah.
And if you need more time, just ask. We'll probably give you a few more days there.
Now I
And
feel like
sign
an
up by yourself.
infomercial.
Enter a credit card. You can expense it. Use your personal card and expense it. Ask permission. Ask forgiveness, not permission. No, just kidding. But we made it accessible. We've got you covered with documentation, help videos, blog posts by the experts. We've got the enterprise experience with maintainers. We know what we're doing, and we're still building this, and we love to hear feedback. So if at any point you're trying this out, you think, hey, how can this work for me? I'm not sure. Send a message to our support team. They're amazing. They love to help.
Yeah, this is easy to try, and the feedback that we've had since KubeCon launching this, making it so accessible, has been phenomenal. I mean, people are kind of going nuts over how much easier. Like when you do this stuff, I remember I had this experience. We'll close with this, okay? But like, I remember early on in my career, I had spent a lot of time learning how to like build and optimize a Linux server. And like, I just was like really good at it. And I was like, oh man, I could set one up in like 30 minutes. And I felt really good about that. And then one day I ran a container and I was like, oh, I will never use that skill again. That is gone completely. And this to me feels like that times 10, where it's like, oh, I've been building promotion flows using CI/CD. I've been doing this manually. I've been doing this for 20 years. I got really good at it. I can build this stuff with the Jenkins pipeline, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd use this and I'm like, oh, I will never do it the old way again, because it is so much better. It's so much easier. It's clearer for all the users. All the developer experience is 1,000 times better. And a lot of what has happened with GitOps is a lot of the infrastructure advantages that are associated with it have come with sacrifices in developer experience. And this brings all that stuff back times 10. So you're way better off than you were in the beginning. So thank you, Idan, for coming on and talking with us about this, and great work. Building this out with the team and making it happen, because it's really, I think it's a game changer. I think it's totally revolutionary, and it's the thing I'm most excited about that we're doing at CodeFresh at Octopus Deploy. So thank you again.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure. Yeah, have a great day. Great night.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Once again, feel free to subscribe here for Argo Unpacked news and updates.
Yep, that's just codefresh.io/Argo-Unpacked. And of course, you can just find it on social media too. Or just search Argo Unpacked. You'll find us right away.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.